Test 3.4, item 1. The domain of a function is integers and has a negative slope. To have a negative slope, the line would decrease. So A has a negative slope and B has a negative slope. You should not choose C or D because it has a positive slope. You could cross those out. Now, which one has a domain that is integers? Well, integers are whole, not fractions, not decimals, but whole numbers and negative, positive numbers. So -4, -3, -2. So A is integers. B are real numbers. This is called a continuous graph because the points are connected on the graph. Your answer was A. What is the solution to the inequality? There are two strategies, maybe more, but at least two strategies you could use to solve this inequality. First, you have a -3 multiplied by x minus 4 in parentheses. So to eliminate -3, you would divide by -3. Dividing by a negative will reverse the inequality, so you should not choose B or D because those did not reverse the inequality. If you divide 15 by -3, you get -5, and the next step would be to eliminate -4. The inverse operation is adding 4, so adding 4 to -5 would give you -1. The correct answer was A. The graph shows a distance-time graph. The distance is in meters, the time is in seconds, and you are asked to find the rate of change from x equals 2 to x equals 5. This is simply a slope question. So the slope of the graph would be the change in y, or the change in the distance, divided by the change in the time. Well, if you'll look at 2, the y-coordinate there is 10, and at 5, the y-coordinate is 40. So from 10 to 40 means it went up 30 meters, and then from 2 to 5 means it went over 3 seconds. And if you divide 30 by 3, you get 10. So the correct answer was C, 10 meters per second. A company has an expense account for employees. This function is in terms of days. So the x is the number of days. So what does the x-intercept mean? Well, the x-intercept is where the function equals 0. You could put this in a calculator, but for most students, it's easier just to think about what it means to do the problem. So the question is, I have 320, so apparently this is money, $320, and I'm deducting 8 each day. That's what this is saying. So the question is, how many 8s can I get out of a 320? I can't go past 0 because then I would have negative money in the account. So we don't want to go into the negatives. So the correct answer was B. And that's because 8 times 40 is 320. 320 minus 320 would give you 0, which is your x-intercept. So the correct answer was B. To solve this equation, you could do it manually, which would take a while, or you could use the calculator. Now, for this particular test, you didn't have your Desmos, which would have made this super easy. So instead, you can type this equation into your Texas Instruments calculator by putting the left side in y1 and the right side in y2. So 4 divided by 3 is the same as 4/3, so I'm going to put that. Minus 2, x is right next to alpha, plus 6, open parentheses, x plus 3, close parentheses. Now, if you'll arrow down to y2, we can put the right side. 1 divided by 3, open parentheses, 4 minus x, close parentheses, plus 5. Now, many of you did this problem and did it correctly without the use of the calculator, or at least not using this strategy. But I would encourage you, particularly on one like this, where you have a fraction that's being distributed, giving you more fractions, it's always a good idea to check your answer using technology, just to be safe. Now, you could graph this and see where these lines cross, because these are both lines. But an easier way is just to go to the table. Type second graph to go to your table. Now you're looking for y1 to equal y2 because that's what this says, equal. And none of these equal. But if you'll scroll up, you'll see the numbers are getting closer together until you get to -3, and y1 is equal to y2. So the correct answer is -3. If you have not done this before, this strategy is in the Calculator Workshop 1. So that is in one of your assignments. You might want to go back and practice doing the examples, and then there's some extra practice items in that workshop for you to try. So please do that before you take the next test. What types of numbers would be used for the domain? The money in the cash box is a function of the number of tickets. Well, these are things that you count, and we use integers only for things that are countable. So we're going to put this one in integers. The speed of a bus depends on how far the accelerator is pressed. You cannot count speed. You cannot count how far you press the accelerator. These are things you measure, so we will use real numbers for that. The ink left in a pen is a function of the number of hours the pen has been used. The number of hours is not something you count. I mean, I guess you could count, but you're going to also use the numbers in between, so you would want to use real numbers for this. Ink, of course, is like a liquid, so you would not count that. You'd measure it. The number of boxes needed depends on the number of families moving. Once again, you would count the number of boxes. You would count the number of families, so be sure to choose integers. Because number of boxes would be integers. What is the y-intercept of the equation? Now, if we had Desmos, we could just type all that in and look at the y-axis and see where it crosses, but we don't have that. So, what you will do instead is you will solve the equation by eliminating this term. Minus 2x will be minus 2 times 0. A y-intercept will have a 0 for the x-coordinate. Every point on the y-axis has a 0 for the x. So you can eliminate this term and then solve the rest of this equation. So if you have an 11 here, you could subtract this 7 from it and get 4. This is now gone, so all you have to do is divide the 4 by the 3 to get y by itself. So y would equal 4/3. The answer was A. This is the area of a triangle. We're solving it for h. So if we have 1/2, we're going to multiply the a by 2. So there's really only one answer choice that multiplied a by 2. So you could stop there, but you should also divide by b to get the h by itself. So 2 times a divided by b. The answer was A. This is a real estate developer. This problem is actually very similar to the one earlier. It says the function represents the number of acres of land left to clear in terms of days. So x is once again days. So what inequality best represents the domain? That would be your x's. So the question is, how many x's can I use here? If I have 240 and I'm clearing, meaning I'm taking away 16, how many 16s can you take away from 240 until you reach 0? Because you can't go past 0. You're not going to have a negative amount of land or negative area or acres of land. So the correct answer was B. You can put a 0 in here and you'll get 240 out. And if you put 15 in here, 16 times 15 is 240. You'll get a 0 out. So you can't go past 15 or you will get a negative answer out, which is not... doesn't make sense in this context. So that's what this word means, context. Choose B. What is the value f of -20 for f of x equals? Now this can be done simply by taking x and replacing with -20, but I'm going to show you something cool. You can also go to y equals and type in this function. So I think I'll do that. The function was -3.2 x plus 23. And then you can go to the table, second graph, and you can scroll till you get to -20. And the output, well, let's see, I skipped it, is right here. The y value was 87. So that's a real quick and easy way to evaluate a function using a table in your calculator. The sides of a triangle are related by the Pythagorean theorem. Solve for B. So here's B. I need to get everything but B off this left side of this equal sign. So notice this is added to a squared. So you would subtract a squared, which means you could eliminate answer D because there's no subtract anywhere in that one. And then you would take the square root of both sides. So it's definitely not A because there's no square root there. They actually divided by 2. So the question is it B or C? Well, the answer was C. When you take the square root of a difference, you cannot just take the square root of each number out like this did. You have to leave it like that. In fact, 100% of the time you'll miss it if you take it out like this. So be sure to leave that square root in there. The correct answer was C. Growth patterns of 4 species of plants are recorded in tables, which is linear. A linear pattern has a constant rate of change. That means if you go from 4 to 5, this went up 1, 5 to 7, that went up 2. That is not linear because the growth rate is changing. So let's go down here to D, and you'll notice 3 to 7 is going up 4. 7 to 11, 11 to 15, 15 to 19. They're all going up 4. So D was the correct answer. The growth rate was the same. Question 13. Chen Wu went into the field and noticed 1 goose. The next day he noticed 4 geese. The number of geese is represented in this sequence, 1, 4, and so on. Well, if it's arithmetic, or arithmetic is the proper pronunciation, then that means they're adding something. So from 1 to 4 is adding 3. So you know not to choose C and D because on those problems you're not adding anything. It looks like you're multiplying. B is not going to work because if you plug in a 1, 1 plus 3 times 1 is 4, but that's not the first term. When you plug in a 1 here, you should get this first term. If you plug a 1 in here, 1 plus 3 times 1 minus 1, this gives me a 0. So 1 plus 0 would be 1. So the only one that works is A. The number of mosquitoes in a pond can be represented by the sequence 4, 12, 36. What is the 4th term? Well, let's look at the pattern. It went from 4 to 12 and then 12 to 36. So what's happening is it's multiplying by 3. So let's take 36. Second mode will take you out of that table. And let's multiply 36 by 3. And you'll get 108. So the 4th term in this sequence is 108. Felix paints houses. He is paid $25 per hour of work plus a one-time fee of $16 for extra supplies. And so we have a function of x represented in this graph for Felix's pay. There's an ordered pair highlighted here. F of 5 equals 141, so that's this blue point. What does it reveal about the scenario? Well, the 5 would be your function of hours. So you know the 5 is hours. And so this 140, actually it's 141, must be the pay for Felix. So let's go down here and see if we can fill in our boxes. Felix earns $141 for working 5 hours. Jonathan's total pay is a function of sales in dollars. He earns a base salary of $1,500 plus 10% of his sales. The 10% is represented by 0.1 in this function. Which 2 order pairs work? Well, this one is just simple calculation. So let's go to and type this in the calculator. If we have 1,500 plus 0.1 times 105, which is my first answer choice, I do not get this amount out, so my output is incorrect. If you'll type second enter, you can change that 105 to 430. And that one works, so choose B. And then second enter, let's change this one to 560. And that one works. So the other 2 don't work. It does say 2, and that's the way it is on state test. If you have 5 answer choices, 2 of those answer choices are correct. Let's move on to the next one. Solve the inequality for y. You want to get your y by itself, so you would subtract your 3x, so you should choose either A or B because you have minus. When you divide by 4, that doesn't change the minus, and it does give you the -2, so let's cross these two out. These don't work. So let's see, which one is it? If I have a -3x and I divide by the 4, I'm not going to flip the sign. This sign is a greater than. It's not going to flip because I'm dividing by +4. So the answer was A. Which region should you shade? Now, you may think below the line because of the less than, but this is kind of tricky. If you plug in 0, 0, which is the origin, 0, 2 times 0 minus 3 times 0 is 0. And 0 is less than 3. So that means 0, 0 is a solution because it made it true. So you should shade here. Now you may wonder, why is it shading above if it's got a less than? Because I thought less than meant below the line. Well, it typically does, but because of the negative in front of the y, if you were to solve this for y, it would flip your sign. So anytime you see negatives in an inequality, it's always a good idea to pick a point and test it to make sure you're getting the right areas shaded. So in this case, we would shade above the line. Management agency keeps records of animal populations. We have antelope in this row and deer in this row. So which two conclusions are true? Again, we have 5 answer choices. We're picking 2. So antelope is going up 10, which is a constant rate of change. So that would be answer choice C, and that one's kind of obvious. The deer population is going up following a pattern, but it's not a constant rate because it's actually going up more each time. It went up 4 here, 8 here. So don't choose that one. That is not a constant rate. The deer population will be greater than antelope in 2020, and that was actually the other correct answer because the antelope in 2020 will be 90 and the deer will be 128 if you double 64. So the correct answer was B. All right, to translate this to the right, I would recommend putting this in the calculator. So I'm going to clear out all that. Clear that out too. Let's do alpha, I think it's window. Yeah, alpha window 1 will give you the absolute value, and you're going to put X in there. Now go down to Y2 and let's look at these answer choices. I want the graph to go right and down. So they all have the same numbers. Let's do alpha window 1. And let's put in X plus 3. And then we'll put plus 5. Now, I don't know if you can tell now. In your calculators, we have color. This one does not have color. But you can tell this graph went up. This is the parent function, and this one's up here. That's your second one. And it went up. I want it to go down. So what made it go up? Well, if you'll notice, it went up 5. So we don't want to do that plus sign. So let's go back and make this minus 5. So it's going to be either B or C. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put both of them in here. There's a minus sign in between both of these. So C is going to be the right answer. This one goes right and down. So it's the only one that does that. So the correct answer was C. Now, if you remembered that, that's fabulous. But we just started doing it, so you should always check in your calculator, especially if it's a new concept we've barely been over. All right, what is the range of this function? The range are the y values, so start at the lowest point, which would be here. Be careful. This 3 is an x coordinate, so you will not use 3. You will use 0 because the y-coordinate of this point is 0. And if you go up, how high does this graph go? We'll look over here and you can tell it keeps going. So this graph is just above 0 or equal to 0. There is an open point here, but that doesn't really help you with your range at all. So you don't really need that number. You need this number, 0, and then it goes up forever. The correct answer was C. solve the compound inequality. You would subtract 1 from 13, and then you would divide by 3. You would subtract 1 from -1, and you would divide by 3. So you know the answer on the right is 4. There's no way to get an OR statement from this AND statement. This is an AND. This is an OR. So you should instantly cross that out. This is never possible. So it could be this one. Let's make sure. If we subtract 1 from 13, we get 12. If we divide by 3, we get 4. So this number's right. If we subtract 1 from -2, we get -3. If we divide by 3, we get -1. So this one's right. And both signs are correct. This one's less than, this one's less than or equal. So B was correct. 23. Blake and Nelda are both walking from school to the park on a straight path. So they're walking in the same direction is what this is saying. Blake's distance from the park is B miles, and Nelda's distance from the park is N miles. What does this mean? Well, think about what it means. This is a conceptual problem. There is no work. If you take Blake and Nelda's distances and subtract them, you are finding the distance between Blake and Nelda. Notice the absolute value of the difference means distance between. So if I had like a 5 and a 7, I did 5 minus 7 and took the absolute value, I would get 2. That's 2 spaces apart on the number line. This is saying the distance is less than 3. So let's see what this says. Blake and Nelda are both 3 miles from the park. Well, no, it doesn't really tell us what N is or what B is, so we have no idea how far each one is from the park. In fact, that's not in here, so don't choose that one. Let me X that one out. Blake and Nelda are less than 3 miles apart. Okay, the distance apart is N minus B in absolute value, less than 3. This one is the right answer. C is the opposite. It says more than 3 miles apart, but this is a less than sign, so this is not true. And Blake and Nelda are both less than 3 miles from the park. We don't really know where they are in relationship to the park. We know how in the relationship they are to each other, and this one I don't think can be true if they're less than. Well, it's possible, but yeah, this one is not what this is saying. So the correct answer was B. Which linear inequality is modeled in the graph? Well, first we have a dashed line, which means the points on the line are not included. If that is true, you could not choose A or B because A and B have an equal to, meaning the line should have been a solid line. And then finally, you'll notice both remaining answers have a y-intercept of 4, which is correct. But the slope is going down 1, right 3. So you should not choose D. This slope on C is down 1, right 3. So the correct answer was C. And then finally, the performance task. I'm not going to show that to you, but I will describe a few things. The first was your pattern block. Your first term should have 3 blocks in it because of this 3. Your second term should have 5 blocks because you have to add 2 more. The next one, you would add 2 more and get 7 blocks. So however you arranged your blocks, you should have 3, 5, 7, and so on for your sequence. And you should have at least 3 terms, hopefully. All right, the trapezoid table problem. The first term in the sequence is 5 because there were 5 students. The second term would be 8 because you're going to add 3 more when you put another table on here. You were supposed to draw it with the shapes. And then the next one is actually this one, so you can count these up. It should be 3 more, 11, I think. So this would be 9, 10, 11. Yeah. And then you needed 1 more, so you would add 3 more and get what? 14, I think. You would list a numeric pattern for your sequence. There's many that work, but the easiest one has a 3 in it. Because you're adding 3 each time. So if you do 5 plus 3 and in parentheses n minus 1, that's your typical expression for an arithmetic sequence. All right, correct whatever you need to for this test and prepare for the next one. Have a great day.